So I'm really excited to talk to you today about performance anxiety, symptoms, how we experience it, and then go through some practical tools for helping our students. I feel like a 5-hour workshop plan, so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can and save some time, hopefully, for the end. So here's the agenda for the day. First, we'll talk about performance anxiety, kind of look at some of the causes and symptoms physiologically and some other factors. We'll talk about management and how we can help our students build self-efficacy, and then talk about a couple of scenarios that, at least in my experience, come up pretty frequently. And if we have time for any additional thoughts or comments at the end, we'll get into that. Before we begin, I want to share this caveat that most of us are not therapists or trained mental health professionals. So we shouldn't be trying to diagnose or go beyond our area of expertise. That being said, it doesn't mean that we are not able to be mindful listeners and that we can provide our students with the tools they need to be able to perform with confidence. So unless there are any underlying conditions that require psychological intervention, we should be able to have a positive impact on our students when it comes to performance anxiety. So with that in mind, let's talk about it. So let's talk about a couple of definitions of performance anxiety. This first one is by Diana Kenny, who's the author of The Psychology of Music Performance Anxiety, an excellent book if you haven't read it yet. So it says performance anxiety is the experience of marked and persistent anxious apprehension related to musical performance, which is manifested through combinations of affective, cognitive, somatic, and behavioral symptoms. So this is a pretty comprehensive definition. It refers to anxiety and fear that affects multiple domains, our mood, our mental response, physical sensations in the body, and also our behavior. And we'll break this down here in a little while. And here's another definition by Dr. Paul Salmon, who's the author of Notes from the Green Room, if anyone's read that book. He's a psychologist specializing in performance anxiety. And this one says it's the experience of persisting, distressful apprehension about and/or actual impairment of performance skills in a public context to a degree unwarranted, given the individual's musical aptitude, training, and level of preparation. So this definition is has a different flavor. It's a little more extreme than the first one. It takes it to kind of a level where the anxiety actually impairs the performance. This is also a valid definition. It helps us realize that performance anxiety exists in a continuum if we kind of look at it together with the previous one. Some people experience more intense symptoms, other people experience milder ones. The way that it interferes with performance can also vary. It can serve as a way to heighten the experience, but it can also be detrimental to the performance and the performer as well. So it's important to understand when people can be affected by performance anxiety so we can make a plan for our students. For some people, it starts 2 to 6 weeks prior to the performance. In general, can start before that. For others, it's more intense in the 24 hours prior to the performance. It can also sort of catch us off guard the moment we walk on stage and even persist after the performance. And that's because our body still thinks that there is a threat to us. We haven't yet communicated to our body that we're now safe and the danger is over. So anxiety can continue to linger even after the event is over. It can appear in multiple situations, not necessarily just the high stakes performances at Carnegie Hall and such. It can be during exams like SATD, adjudicated events, guild, federation, recitals, studio, guild recitals, lessons, rehearsals, school performances, or even, students who play other instruments and so on. So who does it affect? It can really affect everyone. No one is immune to anxiety, and that's because it is our body's physiological response to a threat. It's a completely normal response to a stressful situation. As I mentioned earlier, it does exist in a continuum, meaning that everyone's experience is different. And as a result, the intervention or the strategy that we use to cope with anxiety also has to be personalized. So we'll talk about that more. So if performance anxiety affects so many of us, then, and it can have such a negative effect sometimes, then why aren't we just talking about getting rid of it, eliminating it? Is there a magic potion that we can take that would make it go away? And while it would be nice to think about removing the stress altogether, the reality is that we wouldn't perform our best if there was no level of pressure or anxiety associated with performance. And there's research around that, especially with athletes, that shows that the performers who, or the athletes who practiced under pressure ended up performing better when it was the time for the actual event. So you can see here in this slide, the Yerkes-Dodson law, which states that for optimal performance to occur, there has to be the right combination of stress and pressure like physical stress or anxiety. When we perform under the right conditions, we're at a heightened state that actually kind of pushes us to perform better if we've done the right preparation, of course. If there's a low amount of stress, we're too relaxed, the performance is not likely to have that magic excitement to it. And if there's too much stress and anxiety, the performance is also likely to suffer. But if we can get right in that green zone, then our performance has the potential to be more exciting and rewarding. So I want to go a little bit deeper with this idea of the best performance or the optimal performance and kind of distinguish. There's kind of a nuanced difference between the two. You might sort of recall a time when you played your absolute best, right? Trying to recreate that every time you got to the stage. But that may be tricky to recreate your absolute best performance. It's the very narrow conditions for that to actually happen. It's very rare to be able to recreate that. But if you think about an optimal performance, as you can see here in this diagram, there's a wider range of possibilities and outcomes. For example, you might have a bit more stress than normal, but still play very well. Or there might be more distractions than you had in your best performance. You might still give an excellent performance. So all these possibilities create a wider range in which we can still experience fulfilled performances, even if they're not always our very, very, very best. That is very, very difficult to recreate. So everyone experiences performance anxiety a little differently, but let's take a moment to maybe remember a time in the distant or maybe not so distant past that you've experienced performance anxiety. So just maybe take a moment to think about that and maybe remember what were some of the physical sensations in your body, maybe what were some of the thoughts that were popping in your head. And if you're willing, maybe take a moment to type in the chat, what is your general experience of performance anxiety? And if I can find the chat, I'll get to it. How do I get to it? Do we have stuff in the chat? Oh, there it is. Heart racing, that's right. Others? It's a very common one. Shaking visibly. Sometimes the foot. I remember my foot used to shake like crazy with the pedal. It was very hard to pedal. Anyone else willing to share? Holding the breath? Absolutely. The breath is like one of the first things to go. Can't stop practicing. Stiff muscles, hands, neck. Absolutely. All of that. Yeah. Memory. Yeah, exactly. So there's a cognitive response to it as well. Thank you all. Absolutely. So just to point out that we all experience it in different ways and multiple different symptoms, right? So here are a few. Oh, there's one more here. Making unusual mistakes on the day. Yeah, things that maybe you've never made a mistake on before and it sort of catches you off guard. So all those are valid experiences and normal of performance anxiety. So think I skipped a slide. Here we go. In this diagram here, you can see what happens in the body, physiologically speaking, when the body's alarm mechanism is triggered. So when there's a perceived threat, a car coming at you, a bear, or a public performance, the brain views all of that as threats, right? The hypothalamus in the brain will release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and then hormones will lower functions in the body that it doesn't, that are considered non-essential, and will pump more blood to the functions that are essential for survival. So it activates the sympathetic nervous system, the one on the right hand of this, of the diagram here. Help me oh, thank you. Okay. So pupils are dilated so we can take in more of our environment visually. The heart pumps faster to distribute blood to the large muscles. Digestion, reproduction, growth processes are all inhibited when the body's stress reaction is activated. So what we want to do is activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming the body down and stimulating that relaxation response. So finding that happy balance between activation and adrenaline going and having that excitement and energy, but not to the point where it could be detrimental to the performance, and having methods and mechanisms for activating that parasympathetic response, that calming response, to get us to that right space that we can perform our optimal performance. So here are some more symptoms. We already talked about some of these: increased heart rate, shortness of breath, muscle shakiness, sweating, trembling, dry mouth, nausea, chills, cold hands and feet. And that makes sense, right? Because the blood will go to the larger muscle groups to make you faster for running away from the threat. Behavioral symptoms, procrastination. That is a quite common one. And I just wanted to point this one out because sometimes it can be perceived as laziness, but actually it could be anxiety that's making you kind of push away the threat and avoid practicing or avoid getting ready for a performance because you're very anxious about it. Fidgeting, changes in eating, drinking, smoking, obviously for the older students or, you know, performers, adults. Irritation, and some cognitive responses here: fear of failure, going into a high alert mode, excessively worrying, that self-criticism getting more and more intense, intrusive thinking, so unwanted thoughts that pop up in our heads that may be negative or recurring, and catastrophizing. For example, coming up with scenarios that are very negative, things like, I'm going to walk on stage, I'm going to miss a note, and the whole thing will be a disaster, and I won't know where to restart from. I'm going to leave the stage. I'm not going to finish my piece. I'm going to trip on stage. Everyone will laugh at me. Those kinds of things, catastrophizing situations that are unrealistic, yet cause a lot of stress. Can we relate to some of this stuff? Yeah, okay. Good, I'm not alone. All right, so we talked about the physiological mechanism. It's obviously a simplistic explanation. We all have the same alarm mechanism, yet performance anxiety affects us in different ways. So why is that? Well, there's several other factors that come into the picture. It's more complicated than that. So no two people's experience is exactly the same. So it's important to just kind of remember when we're talking about strategies later on. So here are a few other factors. One of them is preparation. How much time have you put into preparing for the performance? What was the quality of the practicing? Did you have lots of time to prepare? Did you learn the piece quickly? Is the memory settled? Is it pretty fresh still? Did you practice in many different ways and put yourself through performing with lower level stress? Or is this the maiden voyage of your piece? History, what are some of your past experiences with performance anxiety? Maybe did you have a performance that was less than optimal? Or did you have a confident, exciting performance previously? And so on. How difficult is the piece, right, for you? Is it just at the right level to put you in that optimal performance range? Is it too easy where it won't feel as satisfying, or too difficult? How stressful is the performance situation? Have you played in the venue before? And then mental attitude, in what way do you approach the performance? I remember my professor in undergraduate used to tell me, you know, your recital is going to be like a party. You've prepared and you're just going to have all your guests there and it's going to be a great time. I see his point, but at the time, of course, I wasn't thinking about it in that way. It was like the most stressful thing in my life ever. So I definitely didn't view it that way then. It took me a long time to kind of ease into it and think about a performance as a fun opportunity to share. Personality has also a lot to do with it. Maybe somebody who's very introverted, it might be harder to be on the spotlight. Environment. So one's upbringing plays a role as well. What kind of support were they receiving growing up? What kind of support are they receiving right now from family, teachers, other caregivers, peers, and so on. And finally, what coping skills and strategies has the performer developed? Are they aware of their body, thoughts, behavior when they're experiencing performance anxiety, or are they ignoring those symptoms until it's too late? So all these factors come into play in addition to that physiological response that we talked about. And one more factor that I just have to mention is perfectionism, and having a perfectionistic attitude of I either play all the notes perfectly correctly, or a single mistake ruins the entire performance. Having a higher sensitivity to mistakes and criticisms, having unrealistic goals and standards for oneself, and striving for something that is just simply unattainable. And that can lead to a lot of disappointment and stress. So we already talked about procrastination, which again shows up in students who have perfectionistic attitudes. It's easier not to tackle a big, scary task if you risk making a mistake. So it's better to just not do it. So perfectionism isn't always a bad thing, right? Striving perfectionism can be a good thing. It can be helpful in terms of pushing oneself to do their best, but the judgmental type can be difficult, especially to one's mental health and when it comes to performance anxiety. So at this point, we just say, well, it's too complicated. Let's just not worry about it. It'll take care of itself. And certainly I know that there are many teachers and students who maybe don't address this for various reasons. While it's true that some students will figure it out, right? Maybe it'll all work out. For generations, students have continued on and performed. But what happens if we don't address this? Well, the performance may go on and the student might find it in them to play. They may or may not be traumatized, depending on their past experiences and all other factors we mentioned. But there are some risks that we take as teachers when we don't. Potentially, there could be less enjoyment from the student if they're not able to slide into that optimal performance zone. Poor preparation in terms of the performance, right? Not having practiced being under pressure ahead of time. Developing a fear of performance, and then eventually feeling more physically tight and just having to perform with all those symptoms going on that we've talked about. Eventually, if they've had enough experiences that were less than optimal or scary or traumatic, they might just decide, you know what, this is not for me. I just can't get up in front of people anymore. And I have heard this, and I'm sure you have too, from so many adult students who come back to lessons, and they come in because they had bad experiences in the past, but they love music and they want to do it in their own terms now, where they don't have to perform in public. And so I'm thinking, well, here we are teaching young students. And I think if we can prevent that from happening, that would be so much better for them and for the audience they're playing for too. Much more exciting performances. And then again, it can cause persistent negative thoughts, fear, failure that could translate into other areas of their lives, like public speaking, for example. So we've talked about, we can all agree that there are terrible things that could happen when performance anxiety is not handled appropriately. So let's move on to some tools, management. What can we do as teachers to prepare and support our students in this experience? So I hope we can agree that it's important for us to address performance anxiety to some degree that's appropriate for the student. One of the things that we can do is normalize performance anxiety. Students shouldn't feel like they're the exception or that something is wrong with them when they experience performance anxiety. A good way to do that is simply by encouraging discussions and conversation. Talking about it really, really helps. Sharing our experience to the degree that that we're comfortable and that it makes sense also helps the students feel, okay, if my teacher also goes through this, then it must be okay. Listening non-judgmentally, trying not to interrupt, to validate their experience, and we'll practice this a bit at the end. Simply saying something like, oh, it's really tough to perform in public. It makes sense that you're feeling so nervous. Even just that is so validating to a student, as opposed to, don't worry about it, you'll be fine, which is a more dismissive approach that might make the student feel like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't be experiencing, maybe I shouldn't be feeling this way. And the most important job that we have as teachers is to prepare students for all aspects of performance anxiety consistently and methodically, just like we prepare them for everything else. This should be part of our planning. But again, remember, there are multiple factors that come into performance anxiety. So in the case of younger students who have a parent or a caregiver who looks after them, it's important that they're part of that conversation as well. They're already part of their students' performance anxiety response because they are an important piece of their upbringing, right? And helping them develop that confidence just in themselves. So in this way, we can also incorporate them specifically when it comes to performance anxiety with music performances. They need to be attentive and supportive. Again, listening non-judgmentally and empathetically. The child may not be saying anything and may not even know how to verbalize, hey, I'm experiencing performance anxiety, but their physical symptoms and behaviors may be obvious and noticeable to the parent. So using appropriate language, sharing their own experiences might be helpful too. Hey, I remember being nervous when I had to play the piano when I was a kid, or I still get nervous when I have to give a presentation at my job. And maybe something like, can I share with you one thing I do that helps me calm down? So having these tools reinforced at home is very helpful. One other piece of it, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit, is what happens after the performance when there might be mistakes or when a performance didn't go as well. Usually the first person they'll go to, the students, is their parent or caregiver. So it's important that we help them have some language to share with them and being able to help them with that post-performance anxiety. So as a starting point, before we get into some specific strategies, let's talk about some general guidelines of what to do and what not to do. Let's start with some don'ts and get that out of the way. So don't brush off the student's fear or anxiety as unimportant, right? They end up feeling like their experience is not normal, which just makes it worse. Don't give unhelpful advice. Things like, don't worry about it. That's just impossible because I am worried about it. So that's not really very helpful advice. I see where that well-meaning advice is coming from, but it's also causing just even more negative feelings. Perhaps don't overshare your experiences, maybe not your worst possible experience that might just cause even more fear. So just pick and choose what you share. Avoid putting too much pressure on the students. Encourage them to excel in what they do, but they may already have really high expectations for themselves, especially if they have perfectionistic attitudes. So adding more pressure only just makes it worse. Definitely don't leave performance anxiety up to chance. Some students may be able to figure it out, or they have the tools at their disposal from other experiences or from their family or school. but definitely that won't be the case for everybody. So it's better to be on the safe side and give some tools and prepare them anyway. And don't try to eliminate anxiety. Don't tell them it'll just go away over time, and that eventually they won't be nervous. Maybe that's true, but remember, it's a natural protective mechanism that we have against a threat. So I would be shocked if it wasn't there. That means there's something going on with our body. Yes, we can develop better tools for it, but there still will be some level of anxiety there. So things you can do, think about developing mental skills that go along with all other skills like sight reading technique. Develop those skills over time, not just the week before or the lesson before the performance. Place conversations about performance anxiety within a larger context, like goal setting, right? How can we work backwards from your recital or your studio recital or whatever to set up some other goals that prepare you for that final performance? What does that mean for your week-to-week progress? And then stress management. Is stress something that's affecting your life in other areas as well that's translating into this performance? And I will say that kids and teenagers are definitely not immune to stress. If nothing else, they're experiencing a lot more of it now, considering what they've gone through. They've not had an in-person performance in a really long time, many of them. So now they're coming back to it. So there's a lot for us to work with and be very, very mindful of. Help them develop trust between you and the student. That way they know you'll support them when they're feeling anxious. And also helping the student develop trust and confidence in themselves. Practice empathetic listening, being an understanding and good listener, and withholding judgment, and sharing your story of past experiences, and then rewarding effort. When things go well, remind the student how hard it was when they were first starting to learn the piece, how hard they had to work, how far they've come. When they go through their performance, discuss how that felt and how they were able to go successfully through it. And that gives them the confidence that they can do it again. They have the tools, they have what it takes. Yes, it was hard, but they were able to do it. And that's really something to reward. So much of what we do has to do with physical skills, right? But much of it is about mindset. And as teachers, our mindset is really important because they absorb everything, right? The way that we talk to them, the way that we think, the way that we communicate. So if we place a heavy emphasis on note perfect performances, they are probably going to absorb that and start to think similarly. So here are a few ways of thinking that can serve as sort of a foundation for more specific strategies that I'm getting into next. So one of them is that thoughts are not facts. So thinking that you will embarrass yourself in front of an audience is a thought. It's a negative thought, but it's not a fact. So challenging those thoughts is helpful in the process of turning them around and reframing them into more positive thinking. Playing in front of people is scary, but I'm prepared and I'm ready for it, right? So kind of switching that negative thinking or that thought that really is believable into something that is actually more factual and true. Self-worth does not rely on the performance. So you're still a great student, you're still a great performer. And even if the performance doesn't go as you planned or imagined, your parents will still love you. You'll still have my respect, even if you didn't play as well as you wanted to every single time. Focus on the process, not the product. What they learn during the process of learning a new piece of music is far more important than the one single performance. It's helpful to remind the students of this and provide many opportunities too for performing and working on that process separately. Helping students develop a sense of purpose. Why are we performing? Is it because I'm asking you to do it? Or is it because you've learned this wonderful piece of music and it's just so much fun to go up there and play a piece called Playground Fun and have a great time doing that big old glissando at the end of it? So kind of having conversations about why do we perform? Why are we doing it? We've talked about trust already, but more specifically developing a sense of trust with the process. So if they perform enough times, they know what to expect and they can develop that trust within themselves, and their preparation and their hard work and the tools that you'll help them develop, that they can go through it and have a positive experience. Remembering that the audience, for the most part, wants to enjoy their performance. I've never met an audience member who doesn't, right? And even just speaking as a frequent judge, I always want to enjoy their performance, and I am always rooting for the students. So helping the students kind of understand that and see that can also be helpful. And then just going back to perfectionism, that a no perfect performance is not realistic. So setting up expectations that are realistic, manageable. So I can almost guarantee there will be something, a little thing even, that goes wrong. But preparing my students so they know this is what happens. This is what performance is. They can be prepared for it, and not be caught off guard. So essentially, we're teaching our students what they can and can't control, right? They can control their preparation, they're practicing, meeting their goals, how they memorize, how they prepare. They can influence, in the second circle, what time their parent will take them to their performance, right? They can't quite control that 100%, but they can influence it if they're ready on time and have a plan. And they can't control how many people will be there, if the piano will be in tune or not, what other people would think, right? They can't control that. But knowing that certain things are within and outside of the control can help us let go of worrying about things that there's nothing we can do about. So now that we've got a better idea of causes, symptoms, all the factors that come into play, basics of mindset, let's move on to some more specific strategies. So let's start with some things that I'm pretty sure everybody knows and hopefully does as well. Preparing for a performance, placing the music on the piano for comfort can be a good thing to do, especially at the beginning stages of playing from memory. Finding safety spots in the music to jump to, right? Multiple different ones, and practicing those many times so that under pressure, that recall can be easier. Rehearse those safety spots, teaching improvisation as part of lessons. So students are comfortable finding their way around, maybe to the next safety spots. And it also helps the student develop a sense of comfort with chord progression patterns. There are many, many other benefits, obviously. Making sure that repetition is mindful so that learning can be deeper, and more secure memory as well. Encourage healthy practice strategies so that learning again can be secure. Taking a break when repetitions become mindless is a good thing. And then teaching memorization in multiple modes, right? Whole other presentations here, but I think these are all things that you all know and do for deeper learning. When the students are practicing the performance, encourage them to continue playing even when there is a mistake. And you might also even orchestrate interrupting them while they're playing, or walking around your studio, talking to them so that they get interrupted and can practice that refocusing of their attention back to where they are and finding their next safety zone spot. So these are all very helpful in the studio and during the learning process, but we have to think about also the process of public performance and how we can best prepare for that particular aspect of piano lessons. So I wanted to talk about subjective units of distress, or SUDs, which is a cognitive therapy tool for measuring distress in people with social anxiety. And that can be applied toward performance really beautifully, actually. So what all this means is that we develop a performance plan aimed at building resilience, performance anxiety. In other words, getting used to feeling the jitters and playing through it no matter what, right? That's basically what it comes down to. So the subjective units of distress are measured from 0 to 100, with 0 being no distress at all, and then gradually increasing until you get to 100, and that's the highest amount of distress ever experienced. So we want to think about, setting up experiences that move from low level stress. So at home performance for your kitty cats and your stuffed animals in your family, or your lesson that may be at around 20 subjective units of distress, and then setting up another performance that is more mid-level stress, your studio, retirement home, friends, that may be higher, and then even higher could be an adjudicated event, that final goal, that studio recital. But thinking about how can we work backwards from that high level performance, high level stress performance, and set up other types of performances that gradually increase the stress level so that their tolerance to stress can also gradually increase over time, instead of jumping from you're in your lesson and then your next performance is, you know, a public event with 100 people, right? So having specific goals leading up to the performance, just even getting closer to it the week before, can also be helpful to focus at practice time. Also, it's a good thing to give the brain something to think about, to distract from the anxiety and kind of help focus. So an example is here, like 7 days before, I want to be able to play through my piece beginning to end, identify areas of improvement. 4 days before, I'm working on those areas specifically. 2 days, I'm able to play through with good accuracy, convincing expression. And then finally, I arrive at my goal. You'll know this, I'm mostly saying it for my adult students who are here. So then we come to, right, so we've planned well ahead of time, we've planned for the week before, and then we get to the day of, right? So there are other components that we have to think about to help develop a sense of calm and confidence and control. So what materials are needed for the performance? Do I have everything together? My books, my metronome, my education slip, pencils, whatever it is. Maybe not pencils anymore, everything's online, but is my laptop charged? Clothes and shoes, do I have everything ready to go? Have I tried performing in these? Hopefully that's something they've already done before. Have a plan for the day, taking care of nutrition and hydration, have snacks. We'll talk about that in a little while. Arrange transportation to the venue, have given myself time to warm up or settle into the venue. And also planned for a few minutes to just maybe breathe and calm my body down, right? So here's some things that you can teach. These are not directly related, obviously, to teaching the music, but things that are supporting, right, the dealing with performance and anxiety. So breathing practices are definitely things you can very easily incorporate into every lesson if you wanted to. Deep breathing activates the vagus nerve, which promotes relaxation. So 4-7-9 refers to 4 counts on the inhale, 7 counts of holding, 9 counts of slow exhale, because that's where the relaxation is, on the exhale. So something very, very simple. Do 3 rounds of this breath, introduce it to your students, a tool they can use the day of. For little ones, maybe the counting or the inhale is a little harder. You might try things like smell the flowers or smell the brownies. I had a student here yesterday who loves Jimmy John's. So her thing to smell was a Jimmy John's sandwich. So she would, ham sandwich, and then blow out the candles. So for the little ones, you have to adjust some of the strategies to make them more approachable. Visualization. Visualize a successful performance with as many details as possible. What are you wearing? How are you walking on stage? How are you taking a bow? And so on. Practicing progressive relaxation is also really helpful. And again, you can practice it with students of all ages. It's super simple. You tighten every muscle group from the top to the toes, and then you release. So shoulders squeeze, shoulders release, arms squeeze, arms release, and so on. And that again provides a sense of relaxation. Super easy, super simple, does not take a long time to incorporate. Gentle movement, bringing gentle awareness to the joints. I won't go into the importance of warming up. That's a whole other presentation, but just even very simple movement that can promote just deeper breathing. And that can be move your wrists, lift your shoulders gently, move your neck around. A few things that are really so simple. I love using props. I could go on about the props I love to use, but these are specifically I use for breathing. I have one of those little windmills from the dollar store. Breathe in, exhale, make the thing spin. Again, do 3 or 5 of those breaths. A glitter ball or a glitter jar is another way to do a little very mini meditation and just exhale as you watch the glitter come back down. A tensegrity ball, I love using this one for all kinds of reasons. It's perfect for dynamics too, phrasing, all kinds of stuff. But for breathing, you can do a very easy sort of guided inhale, exhale, and just do a few of these. So a few other things you can use and incorporate are mindfulness, which can be really keen grounding us into the present moment and in touch with our breath. Coming back to the breath can help to calm the mind down, again, by just giving it something to focus on and promote feelings of calm and peace. And it can be practiced through breathing, through a body scan, or even just bringing attention to the soles of your feet for just a couple of moments. Along with the idea of mindfulness is the concept of noticing feelings without judgment and allowing them space to just be. More often than not, strong emotions will soften when they're given space to exist instead of resisting and kind of pushing up against them. Some relaxing yoga poses. So anything that flows forward will activate the parasympathetic nervous system and the calming response. So if you don't know anything about yoga, which is totally fine, you can do a forward fold. So standing up and then just folding forward, take a couple of breaths there. Right there, you already will feel better once you've unrolled up, or putting the legs up on the wall, again, promotes that relaxation. And developing self-compassion, extending kind thoughts and affirmations to ourselves is very important, especially for those of us with perfectionistic tendencies. For younger students, you might teach them, okay, what will you tell yourself right before you play? Let's think about a phrase, maybe something, I got this, or, you know, I'm a champion. I don't know, come up with something that they can say to themselves. And as I'm preparing my students for Halloween Hoot, some things we talk about are you come up and you stand on stage and you look at mom and you say something really cool to yourself and then you take a bow. So again, those little tiny things can really help soften that self-critical negative voice as well. If written exercises are more of your students' thing, there are lots of those as well. You can come up with an emergency focus cue, creating a personally meaningful emergency focus cue when something goes wrong on stage. How will you refocus? So it could be something here, now, focus, or something, just a one word that you practice telling yourself when something goes wrong. Positive affirmations, maybe 2-3 sentences of how you want to think, feel, or do in an upcoming performance. Again, being truthful and realistic. It won't be helpful if you say, I will play every note absolutely perfectly and it'll be the greatest thing ever. Maybe it'll be the greatest thing ever, but there'll probably be something that goes wrong because somebody coughed in the audience and you missed a note. And then dealing with distractions. A good way of doing it is to just have a plan ahead of time. What could be some distractions that have come up before, and what is your strategy? Where will you go in your music? How will you think? What will you tell yourself when that happens? And then reframing perfectionism. I like this quote by Jerry Lynch, and I'm not sure if I pronounced, but Jungliang Alhuang, to be perfect is inconsistent with being human. And I think that is so very true. So viewing performance as a learning opportunity, maybe making deliberate mistakes as they're practicing so they learn to refocus, and then having a good plan for recovering. And so that brings us to that on-stage confidence, right? We've talked about all our preparation and planning, and then we come to the stage. This is it. This is the moment. Having some prior familiarity with the venue can be super helpful. If not, I've shown pictures to my students who are new to performance, or even videos of playing in the space, so they kind of know what to expect. Practice taking a bow before and after. You all know this. Eye contact, who are you going to look at? Having comfort with the bench, the instrument. For some people, talking to the audience is really cool and they love it and helps calm their nerves. For others, it has the opposite effect. Maybe something to experiment with. Think about how you project yourself, right? Taking up a lot of space, right? Just even in the way that you look at your audience and walk on stage, to kind of practice having that sense of confidence, and practicing that a lot in the studio. You might even practice being not walking, very confidently on stage, and have the student, have a conversation, "Oh, how do I look when I walk on stage like this? And how about I look when I walk on stage like this?" And kind of practice going through that together. For a lot of people, apps work super well, just something to kind of have ongoing. And I'm happy to share these slides. There are lots of kids apps for breathing, for mindfulness. Again, we need the parents' support in this. It's such a complicated issue. There are a lot of more things that are tied to it. So if you feel that apps are something that could benefit your students, please explore some of these. As I said, I teach a lot of adults, and I love my adult students. The reality is that performance anxiety really does strike adult students in a way that is a little different than with kids, I think, in my experience. So developing self-compassion has been something that we work on consistently. They can tell you that every single time when we start the class, we start with breathing, we start with gentle movement. And then we always talk about, perfection is not really a thing, right? So we will strive for excellence, and definitely will do our best. But being kind to ourselves is really, really important. Building a sense of community is also really, really helpful for adults, knowing that they're not in it alone, that it's okay, it's part of the experience, providing lots and lots of encouragement, limitless encouragement. And just connecting it with other experience they might have. For example, they might be a teacher, right? And get up in front of their students every day and speak. So is there a way that they can see their piano performance as similar to that? And maybe have they had any tools in the past that they used that were helpful in that other experience that they can translate into playing the piano in front of their class? All right, so just wanted to give you a couple more things here when it comes to nutrition, because it does affect how our body reacts, and that experience of anxiety. If you have a lot of sugar, that's probably going to make you feel even more anxious. So try to limit sugar, avoiding caffeine, even things like Coke or any kind of caffeinated drink that a younger student might take. Depending on the metabolism of the performer, eating at least 2 hours prior to the performance. You don't want to feel hungry, and you don't want to be super full either. Think about a low-fat meal with complex carbohydrates like whole grain pasta, yogurt, lentils, because those take longer to digest, so they'll give you energy for a longer period of time. And then staying hydrated for all sorts of reasons, having a water bottle around. And then no performance anxiety discussion would be complete without just discussing beta blockers quickly. And some of you may have already used them. So this is basically medication that obstructs stress chemicals in the brain from being released. They reduce the heart rate and the physical symptoms of anxiety. It's not something you pick up over the counter, but you need a prescription for it. They're considered safe when used correctly and with a prescription and appropriate dosage. There are some concerns regarding addiction, but what I've read and understand that it's not so much about the actual chemicals being addictive, but it's more like the performers so get used to performing with beta blockers that they're very, very nervous performing without them. So they eventually just end up using them all the time. So that's the sort of addiction concern there. And so while they do help with the physiological symptoms, the underlying anxiety is still there. What I hear from people who do use them is that you may not feel jittery or your heart racing, but your thoughts might still be very jumpy, right? And you might still be kind of feeling very, very nervous, even though you don't have the physical symptoms, which can feel a little bit odd. So in any case, they don't really resolve any underlying conditions of anxiety. So they're really best coupled with some sort of counseling or therapy as well to address those underlying issues as well. So something to keep in mind. All right, so let's talk about a couple of scenarios before I let you find people go on with your day. So I want to we've talked about a lot of different things, but I just want to distill just the way that we talk to students into just 3 basic steps. One is reflect. So reflect back what the student has told you as a way for them to know that you have heard them. And also as a way for them to know that you understood what they're saying, right? They're not saying something different than what you thought they were. And then empathize, right, with them, and then provide support. So let's look at a couple of different scenarios here. So student comes in, recital's coming up, right? Maybe at the end of the week or whatever. And they say, oh, I'm so nervous about the recital. I am sure I'm going to mess it up. It's going to be the worst performance ever in my life. You feeling, you know how this goes. So reflection is the first step, right? Which basically means rephrasing what you heard, saying it back. So it might be something like, oh, it's scary for you to go up there and perform in front of all those people, and you're worried about making mistakes, right? So that's a reflection. I've just said back what the student has just told me. And then empathize. An empathetic response could be something like, I totally get it. You're just not used to playing in front of a crowd. This is your first performance after playing on Zoom for all these years, and it just feels really daunting. Right. So I'm empathizing. I understand how nerve-wracking it is to go up and play in front of all those people. And then we move on to the support piece of it, which can look like, well, do you feel like you've practiced enough? Do you feel well prepared? Is there a specific spot in your music that really scares you? Is it starting the piece? Is it when you get to that really tricky section in the B section? Would it be helpful to go over your performance again? Do you want to practice taking a bow? Do you want to practice starting your piece? And then providing some other strategies like we talked about, things like, oh, let's practice taking 3 breaths together. Maybe I'll pull out my tensegrity ball or something. I'll come up with one strategy to use. And then say something like, okay, so remember, when you wake up in the morning, take your 3 breaths. When you're on your way to the performance, take those 3 breaths again. And when you're sitting down waiting and you're kind of going through how you're starting the piece in your head, you're setting your tempo, you're kind of getting ready, take those 3 breaths again and see if you can kind of calm your body. If it's helpful to kind of touch your heart or hand on your belly, go ahead and try that. So I've provided not only an empathetic response, but also some really practical tools. And hopefully there's a back and forth conversation, right? So I'm maybe better able to understand where this is coming from. Maybe they still feel insecure about a certain spot that we can go over or something like that. But I've also given them some tools that will help calm the sympathetic nervous system and bring them back into their body and help focus their attention. And so we already kind of discussed that performance anxiety can linger. And I think this happens, I don't know, 90% of the time. Student plays really well, right? And they come off and they're like, that was my worst. That was just terrible. I can't believe I missed so many notes. That just was awful. A common response from a very well-meaning parent might be, oh, don't worry. It was just so great. It doesn't matter. How many times do we hear it doesn't matter? Well, it matters to them, right? So we can do better in terms of how we respond to those feelings. So let's go through that process again. So we hear that was the worst. I messed it up. Never going to play again. So reflection, what that might look like. Oh, you're really not feeling good about that performance, are you? So that's just simply saying what they said. I'm just, kind of resonating with that. And then empathizing. Oh, it's just so hard to accept mistakes when you've worked so hard. It's so hard to, just come to terms with the fact that you messed up that section that I know that you've never messed up before. And then what kind of support are we providing here, right? Because saying it doesn't matter or whatever is just very dismissive and not actually helpful. So I tend to think about performances as on a continuum. There'll be another one, right? After this one, hopefully soon. And that'll be an opportunity to do even better. So maybe something like, can we look at your music and can we look at maybe the video recording and just kind of figure out what happened? Did you get distracted in that moment? Let's zone in and think scientifically and analytically about it. and make a plan for the next time. And maybe we figure out, oh, my little sister lost her hat and was running around the performance venue, and that got me distracted. It's like, oh, well, we can't help that because your little sister might do that again. But can we come up with a strategy for when you get distracted? What can you tell yourself? How can you kind of recenter, refocus? Maybe let's find some safety zones. We didn't really do a good job on that for this piece. And that way we come to terms, right? We process what happened, which is really important, instead of leaving feelings of shame and guilt overpower. So we process that together, we figure it out, we look at it objectively, and then we move on to that next performance planning. So these are just a couple of examples. There are many different ways, obviously, of doing that. You'll use your own language, but just kind of as a guide, reflect, empathize, and support as well when it comes time to troubleshooting these difficult conversations. So some final thoughts, because I know I'm getting up on time here. Teachers do play a key role in addressing performance anxiety, as do parents, right? There's no one size fits all. I wish I could just tell you, do this steps and it'll be perfect and it'll be great, but it won't. It'll take experimentation, right? Getting to know your students, what works for them, and also for them to figure it out ultimately. So try different strategies, evaluate, and then try again. And I'll leave you with this quote by Jon Kabat-Zinn. We can't stop the waves, but we can learn to surf, right? We can't stop performance anxiety from happening, but we can develop tools and strategies and provide our students with the opportunities to perform in a way that builds confidence and that it's exciting and really fulfilling, so they can do it for a very long time. There's some really fabulous resources out there. These are some pictures of some books that I particularly enjoy, including my book, but whatever, I felt like I had to include it. There are tons of articles. There's so much research on performance anxiety. So if you want more, I'm happy to kind of share some more stuff. Thank you all so very much for listening to me talk for the past hour. I'm really, really grateful to be able to share all this stuff with you all. And I hope that you'll find one thing that you can incorporate. And if there are any questions, comments, I'm here.
I have a comment. Thank you, Paula. That was like wonderful, wonderful. I really love the part about process what happened, like too, because everybody, you're right. Everybody comes back and says, oh, that was the worst performance. I just love that, like talking through and actually figuring where the mistake happened and rerunning it with positive strategies. I love that part. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna do that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you found that useful. There was a question about showing the slide. I'm happy to share the slide deck. If that's okay. I have it on a PDF and I can just post it in the chat. Somebody asked for it, so I'm happy to. There we go. Any other questions? Yeah, Elena.
Yeah, could you explain a little bit more about it was like an emergency cue word? Is that like you just come up with a word, and what do they do? Yeah. Okay.
Something that, yeah, so it's something that is meaningful to you. Something that, oh, sorry, I think Elena, I just sent the slides to just you instead of everybody. I'm sorry about that. Okay. I can't multitask apparently. Okay. So just coming up with a word that can easily help you refocus your attention to that present moment. So something that's meaningful to you. It could be, I don't know, like now, or attention, or joy, or something, some kind of word that helps you kind of reconnect to your performance. And that's something that you would have ideally practiced ahead of time, not something that you just have lying in the back of your head and hoping that it'll come in that moment, right. But something you've practiced kind of telling yourself when something goes wrong. You kind of let go what happened. You messed up. I remember completely messing up a Bach fugue, right? Who hasn't, right? And so how do you then let go, totally mess that up? What can I help to refocus? So it's basically like a single word.
Okay. And then my other question is, so I often have my kids like practice their routine, walking up to the piano, how they're going to, sit down and all that. That's not the same as visualizing I take it? And can young kids visualize, like, up to like 12 or 13?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, think about the imagination, the crazy imagination they have. They can definitely visualize, but they may need some more guidance, right? They need help on how to do it. So you might do it with them. Yeah, so practicing is absolutely helpful. You should absolutely do it. We should all do it. And I think most of us probably already do. But visualization is more just imagining yourself in that performance situation, in that venue, and imagining every detail, every aspect that you can of the performance, and even visualizing, the post-performance bow and the people clapping and your smile. So basically setting yourself up for a positive experience by already telling yourself that you've gone through it. You've already know what's going to happen, and you can help calm those feelings of anxiety when you feel like you've already kind of lived through it in a way. If that makes sense. Yeah.
I really appreciate the point that for parents and for teachers to just watch what we say when we're trying to like not be dismissive, or trying to like, encourage, when you see a kid, maybe they start crying about something and you say, that's okay, that's, it doesn't matter. And actually that's, and I sorry, I have my baby here.
I love it.
And that's actually, and I remember feeling this too as a kid, that a lot of times I might have given a pretty decent performance for a kid, but there were some things that I was very upset about as a kid, and everybody says, oh, that's okay, that was perfect, but it wasn't. The kid knows that it's us, and by saying that it's okay, the kid feels like, oh, that does what I feel, that anxiety I feel doesn't matter, so just watching out exactly what you say, well-meaning sayings could be dismissive to the kids.
That's right. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. It's always well-meaning, right? We just don't want to see our own kids or our students feel bad, right? And feel sad and upset. And we try to do our best to make that feeling go away. But yeah, how does that make them feel, right? It makes them feel like it doesn't matter. And they know when they've played really well and when they haven't. So it's much better to just be there and be with them through those hard feelings, because that makes them feel like it's okay for me to have difficult feelings, right? And having some guidance and some help to kind of work through that, because we are supposedly the experts, right? We've been through that. We know how it feels. So it just having the tools to help them go through that. Thank you for sharing that, Emily. Elena?
Yeah, do you have a suggestion for a student who really has high anxiety and does not want to play ever in public? I mean, do you force them? I mean, sometimes their parents, or maybe you might feel like, well, they're taking lessons. Shouldn't they be playing for somebody instead of just for me? Is there a point at which you're like, you know what, that's okay, they don't need to play? Or are you always trying to find ways for them to perform?
That is such a good question. And I'm actually kind of going through that with a student, because it's a transfer student from out of state. They never performed in public. They're like level 4 of Piano Adventures, have never had a single performance. So it's something that I've been really thinking about a lot. And the first step was just deciding, is it worth it to perform in public? And for me, the answer is yes, because I think there's so much to learn, and there's so much that this student will get out of being able to, perform in public. So that's the first thing to think about. The other thing to think about is that high anxiety is something that is beyond your area of expertise, probably, from what you said. And if it is, then that may just be something that you can't necessarily help them with, because they may need a mental health professional to work with them and to help them in that process. So another thing to do is to define, what does the public performance look like for that student? Is it maybe just having parents or caregivers come into the lesson and call that a performance? Is it Zooming a couple of friends and doing it over Zoom? So thinking about those subjective units of distress, right? So throwing a student like that to a studio recital, way too much, right? Way, way, way too much. So think about slowly building and see how they would feel, making sure that all the ingredients are there, the preparation is right, they're totally ready, that you've practiced. Maybe you've have them, and I didn't mention this, but recording yourself too is a way to kind of heighten anxiety. So maybe at first they just record themselves, and maybe that's enough for that month. And maybe the next month you do, you know, I don't know, line up the dogs and cats of the house or something and do a performance for them. And then kind of build in that way until maybe 2 years from now, they do a studio recital. But it may be a slower process and one that needs support. And definitely the parent has to be, your caregiver has to be a partner in that process. If that answers, yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
I think maybe even because, you know, we do so much more with videos, you know, just in the last couple of years, that it might be acceptable just to, you know, help them prepare a video performance and then show it at a public recital, but have them be in the audience, but they don't have to deal with all the anxiety of that. And then they see that everybody's just celebrating their performance. Maybe that will make them want to actually do it in person next time.
That's a really great idea. I love that. Yeah, totally. And again, it's a huge confidence boost, right? Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing that.
I had a quick question. I'm wondering if you ever experienced like a student that's young, happy-go-lucky, never had anxiety issues, or at least apparent anxiety issues, and then something, you know, happens, usually puberty or a flip switches, and you know, and so and then all of a sudden it kind of catches me as a teacher off guard, and they're completely like out of their, you know, well, last 6 months ago when we had a performance you were fine and now you're not, like, so I guess, like, is it something that as a teacher I could be more preemptive, but at the same time I'm thinking, well, I don't want to be like, are you nervous, can I help you, you know? Then it's like they're like, no, I don't think I'm nervous, you know, but I don't know. So how do you like kind of navigate? I guess puberty is a big thing. I've noticed they hit 6th, 7th grade and it's like, whoa, they're nervous and they care a whole lot more.
They really do. They care more about what other people say and what they think, right? So there's more at stake for sure. I can see that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with your kind of your intuitive response. You don't want to be like, are you nervous? You know, are you shaking right now? I mean, you don't want to do that, right? Because it's just weird. But I would preemptively give some tools and strategies, which you would hopefully do anyway, not just for performance anxiety reasons, but for even just focusing and concentration. So maybe you choose like 2 or 3 tools to kind of fold into your weekly preparation. And you just say, you know, this is something we're doing with everybody. We're going to be starting our lessons. We're going to be taking a couple of breaths, right? And when things get really frustrating because you can't figure out that fingering or whatever, let's just take a pause, take a step back. Okay, remember those breaths. And so you kind of start to fold it in so it doesn't feel like, let's talk about performance anxiety. Are you nervous already? Okay. You know what I mean? So just kind of weave it in a way that feels organic and natural and, you know, just something that you do as part of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then when it comes closer, it's like, oh, let's do our breaths. You know, when we get up to perform, I get really nervous. My heart starts racing. My body just feels like it wants to burst, and just breathing can be so helpful. Or whatever, I use breathing as an example, but it can be something different. And so just kind of preparing them. This is what happens with me anyway, so I'm going to tell you about it. And if you experience it, here's what you can do. And if you don't, great, you know?
I see.
So maybe come at it that way.
Yeah.
See what happens. It's experimentation, right? Because you
true,
never know, right? You've been teaching the student and he was all fine, and then all of a sudden,
like middle school happens, and then woo.
Middle school happens. Yeah, exactly. Right. Bilge, you're so sweet. Make mistakes, make them loud and proud. Yeah, that's right. As I say that.
Great. And we'll make Gay the last question just for time.
Yes, and we have to go.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, you know, I wish there was a way that we could normalize it more easily. And sometimes I think just being a person in front of other people, no matter if it's a performance, no matter if it's just to say hi, just that part is so scary. And maybe there's more things we can do in our studios to just have student be in front of other people without like a whole performance of a full piece, or, just to get them used to being in front of people if they're that sort of a nervous type. It seems like it's always such high stakes for a performance.
I agree. It could be just go up and show us your bow, or go up and introduce yourself and say, hi, my name is da da da. Next week, I'm going to play this piece for you, but not today. And then go back and sit down, right?
Yeah.
Right idea. Yeah, so it's little steps, right? It's the same idea with SUDs, little steps to get to that final big thing. And the idea is that it increases your tolerance of that anxiety. You're able to handle it. And there's a quote that I sometimes share with my adults: you're nervous, but you do it anyway, right? That's the thing. You're scared, you're terrified, but you do it anyway. So how do you kind of cope with that fear? Sure. Great ideas. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that was a really good idea.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Really grateful to be here with you today.